What's going on, guys, and welcome back to this episode of DM in the PM. My name's Tom Quinn, resident dungeon master here at Modern Myth. And today we're going to be checking out a really cool tool I've been having a ton of fun with. And to help me demonstrate that, who better than the man himself who created it? That's going to be John Szeder, creator of the DerfDice application. And how's it going, John?
Hey,
Thanks for sitting down with me, brother.
yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I'm doing great. Just happy to be here and showing off some cool stuff that I've worked on over the years. DerfDice is one of those things that as you're sitting down and playing the game as a software developer, sometimes you sit down and say, "Hey, here's a problem that I have, and I want to solve it." Right, and so
Right.
got a chance to sit down and fiddle with building some tool stuff over the years of running campaigns. And then when the pandemic hit and a bunch of my coworkers and our game was into a virtual game at that point and it was on its way out, I sat down and said, you know what, there's a lot of people playing the game now, and I bet you there'd be a lot of interest in taking the stuff that I've been building and using on my own over the years and turn it into a web application as a fun side project. And it went live of January of last year. So yeah, or this year, sorry.
Awesome. And I definitely want to get into the nuts and bolts of the application. Like I said, I've had an opportunity to be hands-on with it. I have been, to be honest, it has subverted all of my expectations. I think have fallen into a similar trap of a lot of 5th edition dungeon masters that I will admit, in playing with this app, I realized how much I've let my own random table application slide at the table. I really should be utilizing them more, and this app really helps to remind me of what a potent tool they are. So I definitely want to start getting into the app. But to give everyone a sense at home, kind of what was your entry point into the Dungeons and Dragons hobby, and kind of give me a little bit of a sense of that for you, and kind of how that influenced this project.
Yeah, absolutely. I started playing D&D when the Forgotten Realms box set was launched in 1987, right, to give you a sense. So it's been a large number of years. I played with some of my friends in public school and then into high school. And, from there, in the middle of my 4-year college degree, I met up with some friends and that while I was doing internships in the summer in Toronto, originally from Canada, and started playing a lot of D&D with those folks. It turns out a handful of them were also DMs and organizers for a convention in downtown Toronto. So I got to spending a lot of time with other DMs who spent a lot of time building stories, and I started building this cool campaign that I've been running for a long time with those guys. It was just like one of those, when you have that campaign that's going on and everything's just firing on all cylinders. The players are doing cool stuff. The bad guys are creating really crazy problems for them to solve, and the world just kind of everything's clicking, right? And I used that and went back to school off of my internship period, had some friends in school that I played with, and I brought these two campaigns together and had them each doing parts of a story over a period of time. And it just plowed forward for probably about 4 years or so until it came to like an end of the era moment. And, as I was doing that, I came to realize that, hey, I'm having a lot of these things where I'm making up this whole story on the fly, right? I'm one of those DMs that just improvises just about everything. I have a couple of those cloth maps where you just draw all your stuff on and then dry erase it off afterwards, and then draw more. And I realized that I had this pattern of a problem that would happen, and I call it the Joe the Elf problem. And what happens is it's like, you're in a tavern, okay? You come to you're halfway between point A and point B. You rolled some dice to see if you have a random encounter, and there's a random encounter, and I use a D8 and a D12. If you roll in the middle, it's just something normal, right? If you roll something extremely low, it's crazy bad. If you roll really high, then you introduce a benign NPC, or they find a pile of money on the side, something, right? So you put a tavern there. They go inside the tavern, and there's a table, and there's 6 elves sitting there having a heated conversation. You're just making this up as you go along. And then someone's like, what are the names of the elves, right? And so you'll freeze for a minute, like, oh, there's Vanyar, and there's Ahelred, and there's Jothar. And then suddenly you'll freeze because you're out of names, right? And suddenly you got to sit down and you're just going to say, it's Joe the Elf is what I call it, the Joe the Elf problem, because you're just going to come up with a name that you remember from everyday life. And you can see that a little piece of your campaign dies in that moment, because you've kind of taken this thing where you have this great creative thing, you're going along, you're in your stride, and then suddenly you just kind of had a record scratch noise because you've forgotten the theme that you're using for all of your elf names. And so I sat down and said, you know what? I think I'm going to make a tool to help me with this that comes up with cool names. Tavern names was the big one and the thing that I've probably used the most over a long period of time. And then NPC names was the runner-up.
Gotcha. And I think I think just holding my finger on the pulse of social media DMs out there, you are in very, very good company with the Joe the Elf problem. And so I think there's going to be a lot of people, if this is their first time hearing about DerfDice, who are really going to I mean, just in that narrow sliver of what this application can do, are going
Mhm.
to get really going to get a lot of bang for their buck just in that capacity. And like I said, as I've been playing with it, um, so much more than just that. So, and I like I said, I'm really anxious to pivot over to the app. But right before we do,
Mhm.
give me your brief synopsis, because we're going to be talking to some of the people who are likely going to be seeing this, or
Mhm.
going to be um, kind of full-time fifth edition crowd. And I think, as I said before, I certainly as of late have fallen a little guilty to this. I think as edition by edition has gone along, the utilization of random tables has fallen a little bit by the wayside, and it really
Mhm.
is kind of a shame because as you outlined with your Joe the Elf problem, I mean, it's little things like that that they can help shore up, but that just maintain so much continuity in a campaign world. So, uh, I guess give me your elevator pitch for all those listening who maybe aren't currently employing
Mhm.
random tables at all, or maybe employing them very sparingly. Why maybe they should reconsider that. I certainly have my own thoughts on this, but I would love to hear it from your mouth, seeing as you clearly are passionate about the subject.
Yeah, I build tools for game development professionally, right? So I've been working in that space for a long time, and there was an interesting Twitter feed from one of the game designers who kind of is like a crossover person. They do a lot of TTRPG stuff, and they also work for a AAA publisher. And they pointed
Gotcha.
out as like, the challenge in creating good content is something like, create some background dialogue for an NPC, right? And you do that as a DM pretty much every day. And they're like, don't do 3 pieces, don't do 5 pieces. A good challenge is to do 30 pieces. And I thought about that for a little bit, and coming up with 30 interesting background dialogue tasks it's at the point where it's tedious, right? And
Right.
so I try to tell people that this is really cool, because what I do is I'll post something to Twitter where I'll give an example of a cool random encounter or a cool prophecy or something else, and then I say, hey, you know what? If you have a couple hours of downtime in your session and you're on your way back from emptying the BBG lair, and you need to have one more thing to eat up the rest of the session, throw this cool abandoned temple at the side of the road that they see that they missed on the way out there, right?
Right.
And
Right.
and, and it helps to fill in gaps in the cadence, and it helps solve the problem what I call tedious creativity, which is the creativity to fill the gaps in your big story. And so the whole point to me is what I tell people about DerfDice is it helps you tell better stories, because it gives you a little help, a little bit of a nudge to add something that's a little bit of like a flavor note to your campaign. And every time I've been watching a handful of folks, previous to this year, I didn't watch a lot of streaming shows or podcasts or things like that. Mostly just
Right.
an avid, reader of things, right? And I decided to see, okay, what's so great about some of the active actual plays out there, and what are the top ones doing, and getting a chance to see some of the prolific DMs who are out there, and some of the roundtables they're at. And one of them was talking about stressful moments as a DM, and one of them was talking about having a bunch of people go into a library, and then somebody starts immediately shouting, "What are the names of all the books?"
Yeah.
Right? So building a list
Kind
of
of a dick
books.
move, players. Come on
Right,
now.
but there's always that one person at the table, or maybe it's everybody, or sometimes they're just not having that day. And so,
Yeah.
a friend of mine and I used to be one of the folks on my table who's using this for his own game. I had him help me build a bunch of tables, and he sent me the link to this Brandon Lee Mulligan, or Mulligan. Anyway,
Yeah.
this video.
Brendan Lee Mulligan. Yep.
Yeah, I couldn't remember his last name for a second, and said, hey, you should check this guy out because he has exactly this problem. And then we built a book generator, right? So you
Yeah.
could sit there all day long and just click a button and say, okay, I need 100 of these, right? It's like, okay, keep
Right.
going. You tell me when you've got enough books, right? Or if there's these 10
Yeah.
books that you want to take and try and sell or do something with, but it adds like flavor notes to the game, right? It's like, when you see these master chefs on TV, they're always, recombining ingredients, and they're doing clever stuff to it and making it fancy. And that's what players really want, is they want a fancy experience. So can you sit down and come up with something that's cool and tax your brain to do that, or do you want to push a button, generate 10 of them? And the thing that I always say, it's easier to pick 3 cool things from a list of 10 than it is to come up with 3 things on your own. So the nice thing about having this is you have a tool where you have this prodigious amount of output, and you can take a look at it and say, you know what, this one's not quite right, this one's a little broken, or maybe these two put together, hey, you know what, there's something there, right? So I can take that, put these together, and add
Right.
some flavor to things, right? And it's
Yeah.
adding those little special twists, like building a random loot table for a dungeon for a dragon horde or something, right? And
Right, right,
instead of saying you find 5,000 gold pieces of jewelry, roll it up and say, here's 30 pieces of jewelry. There's a silver crown with a missing gem in it. And then someone's going to
right,
say,
right,
okay, where's the missing gem? Does it maybe it faintly glows. It gives you an opportunity to take people on a different path and saying, okay, you know what? This gem that was missing from this crown, it has faint traces of magic. If you find the right gem, maybe you have a magic item on your hands, right?
right,
And then
right.
and
And
just kind of go down the rabbit hole
yeah,
and say, all right, let's
I
go.
I love that example because even as you were saying it, the player in my mind was so much more engaged with that crown with the missing gem than I ever would have been with a generic piece of jewelry that you've already kind of assigned a gold value to and basically told me you're going to hawk this for gold at some point. Like,
Right. Yeah.
there's still a world of possibilities in that crown, whereas there's the possibility of 40 gold pieces in a bejeweled crown worth 40 gold pieces or
Right.
what have you.
Exactly.
Um, I love that. And your phrase, I may start borrowing that on occasion. I do really do like I
Hmm.
think you said it was tedious creativity. Was
Yeah.
that your verbiage?
Exactly.
And I think that really does sum up because I've seen and like I said, I've fallen prey uh to this process of having these very bright, kind of well conceptualized spaces and these gaps in between where all I need is that little nudge to be able to help kind of paint those in with a little bit more vibrant colors. And this app does that phenomenally well, both at the table. And I've actually found it's a really fun tool to help world build, just spitball with
Hmm.
yourself, just a few clicks and reading down a list and going like, man, I really like that. That's starting to spool some stuff up in my mind. And then you're off writing a brand new village, or you're off writing a new dungeon, or you're off, so it serves many, many purposes that I think anyone who just hearing, oh, it's a application for random tables, uh, it I'll say I think that my appreciation for it, having been hands on, has grown tremendously because I'm realizing more and more just how potent a creative tool it is for both for random generation, but also for curating creative content in my own mind
Yeah.
to start fleshing out in a non-random fashion. So um, I love that. I don't want to tie up any more time. I really want us to be able to get into the
Hmm.
app itself. If you want to take us through it a little bit and kind of be
Yeah.
able to talk with everyone at home about exactly what that looks like. So
Cool. Let's do that. Okay, so here we go. So this is DerfDice on the homepage here, and the idea is that you have a list of tables. I'm on the DerfLib account, right, which is kind of like the master account that I've set up. I've set up a handful of profiles where there's my account, which is DerfJohn. You know, you can contact me at DerfDice, and my Discord is there. And what you do is you have an account set up that you can go and you can create a bunch of tables and make them public. And as you can see, I'm going to scroll for a minute here. The DerfLib is kind of like your general repository of cool tables, right? So you name it, we've tried to put a table together, whether it's loot tables, hordes, books, back alleys, different things like the markets and taverns and all this stuff, and you can just see there's just like a wide variety of them, right? If I go over and I take a look at, okay, I'm gonna go take a look at the DerfJohn account. Let's pick the first table that I built. That's sort of like my test case for this, which is the ends, right? And you can go and you can roll on it and say, okay, cool. Copper Guildsman seats 33, and you can build a bunch of them. And you'll see the second one here. It's got a name, how many it seats, and then it's got this extra little bit of flavor text, right? Which is, it's got a large fireplace and there's an ancient great bow mounted over the bar. And kind of the
right, I
fun of
love it.
building these tables is mixing it like that. And what I found is if you have a formula where you have like a main idea, a subtype, and a special type, and then you permute it between just the main idea, and the subtype, the main idea and the special type, or the main idea and the subtype and the special type as a pattern. It's a kind of one of those things where you see a bunch of stuff on the menu and it's difficult to decide what you want. You can say, okay, maybe you like the name, the Craftsman Respite, or maybe you like the stuff for the thing for the Halfling's Globe, right? It's in need of repairs. It's walls
Right.
decorated with paintings of local adventures and their famous deeds. And the cook is a fugitive thief who's trying to keep a low profile, right? Suddenly you've got like a whole adventure there, if not two.
Exactly. And this is something I really wanted to highlight for anyone who's seeing this for the first time. For one, I'm hoping as these first few lists are drumming up, you're simultaneously at least keep this playing in the background, or wait until we're done. but I hope that they're already jumping on that URL and starting to work their way over here, because I think already this has begun to outline some of the stuff I really liked about it. And this is what I was talking about drumming up just creative ideas to play with as a DM at your table. Keep the one you were just breaking down with the cook who's the fugitive thief.
Hmm.
Uh, like you said, I mean, like I think everyone expects that they're going to get back the name. Maybe they're going to get back how much it seats. Maybe they'll get a very brief description. I've been really impressed by how many of these entries have that flavor that, like you said, so many of these have essentially a built-in quest hook or
Hmm.
a built-in conflict or a built-in, and it's something I've really been kind of taken aback by. I've really been enjoying how much flavor there is in so many of these different entries.
Right, absolutely. And the fun part about that is you can remix them as well, right? Like for example, the Kings and Pirates table is a combination of a handful of tables that use both the DerfLib account as well as something from a friend of mine. CT Hogan is his profile name. It's one of the ones I follow on the site, and you can generate a whole bunch of random things from it that have extra stuff, and you can pull them all together and say, okay, you know what, I'm going to build a table that uses other people's tables, and take a look at what the contents of that are. So if I go and I take a look at this one here, this is a public link that you click on that. This is something you can share with your friends and say, hey, I want to share some sample output. But then on top of it, you have the ability to take a look at sort of a homebrew entry, and you can see here the Kings and Pirates table takes the Royal Mail name from the DerfLib, and then it's got something from another person, Bjark the Bard, who's a blogger that I chat a lot with about this, who's one of the early users for the
Right,
site.
right. I chat with him on Twitter fairly regularly, so
And
that's really cool to see some of his content on here.
right, and then the CT Hoga table. And if you make your tables public, everyone can use them, right? So you could say, okay, for this one here, I got a pirate name. It's wanted by some royal name of a king. And then you know what? He committed crimes at this ominous fantasy building. So you can endlessly remix these tables together. So if you come up with something, where you've built a cool name, or you built something kind of that's fun, and just keep doing that ad infinitum, right? And so
Yeah.
the most recent one that I did was a city name table, because I built a full town generator, right? And the idea there is, when you have a town, Steinruth, here's the population. It's got a handful of alleys from an alley generator. And then you have like a whole bunch of people that live in the town as, special effects. And then you can kind of keep going from there. So every time you generate one of these, you're going to get something different. This one's got 3 notable churches. It's got 2 inns. It's the foot of a great mountain. And it's where Baroness Caroline the First defeated Crux Radior, right? Some bad guy. And the
I
story
love
is
it.
writing
I love
itself,
it.
right? So,
Yeah.
and to speak a little bit to talking to folks in the Twitter community, I've had 3 or 4 people request help in building some tables, and I've done that for them. And then immediately the fun of that is incorporating them into other things. And 2 or 3 folks who follow these conversations have said, you know what, this just liberated me from a chunk of writer's block. I was like totally stuck on where to take this next adventure. And then I saw this thing that you posted, and I'm like, this is really cool. I'm going to use that. And I'm like, great, that's awesome.
Yeah. 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 It is so chock full of inspiration. And as you were just clicking up these towns, uh, if there is anyone out there who is watching these towns be generated, you know, in real time, just like that, who a grin isn't starting to stretch across their face, because it really is that easy. And I definitely don't want to brush over a couple of things as you were moving through the app there. One, I'm sure everyone noticed as you move to that output link that for uh, exactly, there we go,
Mhm.
for those who are used to a lot of the 5th edition, both independent and official supplements. The application does a great job of delivering something that is essentially formatted exactly as you would expect to see it. So it's a very digestible format if that's the content you're used to utilizing.
Mhm.
So I definitely didn't want to breeze over that. And you hit on a second time, but I think it's one of, to me, the most exciting aspects of the application is the fact that this kind of small social network is going to begin to flourish beneath this, of, that the app becomes more and more powerful the more people are utilizing it and making that content public.
Mhm.
And when I start to think about what this space for generating content could look like a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, as more and more people are utilizing this tool, and sharing the ways in which they're utilizing it. It's going to be pretty unbelievable, I think, what types of stuff is going to be generated at a single click. So absolutely loving it.
Yeah. And the other piece of that there is that making tables is relatively simple, right? I tried to make it so that you have the ability to use a random dice notation in a calculation chunk. So if you wanted to put numbers in, it does that. And
Beautiful.
then all you have to do is just link up your tables and put them in there as you build these things. If you were to build something and change your entry and say, okay, I'm going to add something, my town table. If you're linking your own table, it's going to tell you, hey, that table doesn't exist yet, because it's smart enough to know that that's not a real table yet, right? And coming up with tools to make it so that it is programmer light, right? A few people have always asked for features of things like, controlling capitalization. So you have, carriage returns in there. You have the ability to make the first letter upper or lowercase on your roll if somebody built a table that's slightly not usable for you. And the idea there is, how much can you put into this without generating a ton of work, right? So if you wanted to change this thing and add an entry, you change the number up top, and then you click on add a new entry, and then you put 13 here, and then you add in something, whatever it is that you're adding there, right? And the whole idea is, like, how simple can you make it for somebody to go and change their table? I'm going to delete that because my town generator is perfectly fine the way it is right now. But the whole idea is, what's the baseline for creating a table? On one hand, you can sit down and you can create a table that is just simple stuff and it contains a handful of things, or you can go and make something that's a little bit more complicated, right? And to kind of show that off, let's just make a new table right now.
I love it. Yeah, let's go through that process, because I think it really is. There's no smoke and mirrors here for how approachable this application is for anyone who's wanting to kind of take their first steps in this space.
Yep. So let's build a dragon generator, right? As we know, there's 10 different types of dragons. So we're going to build a thing of dragons. And you can build a complex table where you generate the table and then just edit entries one at a time. Or you can just basically bring up a simple list box and then fill it in. So what do we got? We got chromatic, we got red, we got blue, we got green, black, white. And then we got gold, silver, bronze, brass, copper, right? See, look at that. Currently 10, max 10. I added this thing where you show the current number, because when we made the list of king names, there were 200. And when you say, I'm going to make 1D 200 and you're at 189, you don't know how far away you are. And then you're done, right? And so you've created this successfully. You see this table, you go and roll on it. Say, okay, I'm gonna roll 13 times. There's the different dragons, right? So copper, gold, white, and so on, right? So now we can take this. We got this classic dragons table, and let's go to something where I've got this rumor generator, right? So let's go to my rumor table, and I've got rumor monsters, right? And I'm gonna go and I'm gonna edit that. And I have 1d8 rumor monsters because this is a new table and I don't always make them super fancy to begin with. And I'm going to change this, and I'm going to say, you know what? Let's add the type of dragon it is here, right? And then I'm going to select save. It's underlined in red because that's not an actual word, because, thank you, spell checker. But it's not saying, hey, that's a non-existent table. And I can save that. And now, instead of just saying a young dragon, I'm going to go and I'm going to roll on this, and let's clear the history here. And then, let's roll 13 times. A young silver dragon, a young red dragon. Suddenly we've added an extra element of detail, right? Then I can go and create a dragon age table. And instead of doing it where it's evenly distributed, we might make that a D100, and the first 75% of them are wormlings, right? And then 76 to 85 is young, and then 85 to 99 is adult. And then, if you roll that D00 and get your D100 perfect 1%, then you have your ancient dragon.
Beautiful. Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that struck me in playing around with the app. It really is that simple. I mean, you can create a table, linking tables together. It's a pretty addictive process as you begin linking these together, because with a few very rudimentary tables linked together, you start generating some very, very robust content in a very short period of time. So I want to pivot a little bit here, because I'm almost guaranteeing that someone listening to this right now is going, John, this looks really cool, but man, I've been playing since the 70s. I've been playing since the 80s, and I've got tons of tables, man. Like I've
Hmm.
already got my own way of doing this. I've got spreadsheets of tables and tables and tables. Um, has any consideration gone into trying to help someone who thinks this is really cool, but they don't want to sacrifice all the work they've been doing over the decades? Do you have can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. I built something so that if you have it already in existing homebrew because you have your own published content and you want to generate or test your stuff out, you can import it and export it from homebrew markup. And then additionally,
Beautiful.
if you have most of them, 99% of the people who are doing tables right now are using Excel, right? Somebody's written an Excel macro to basically take an outcome and
Right.
parse it
Right.
over a thing. And you can import it from Excel and just kind of plug it in and enter it the same way as if you're entering it by hand, and away you go. And honestly, these two features were things I added as a result of talking to other DMs. The homebrew one from folks on the internet, and the Excel one was because my friend, when I first started showing this to him, he's like, you know what, I do this, but I also have a bunch of stuff in Excel. And I'm like, okay, let's take that. And provided that they're, delimited by tabs the same way that the cells in Excel are set up that way, you can just quickly import your tables that way and use them. And if you
Beautiful.
if you have a bunch of
Beautiful.
Excel macros and a bunch of files and you're comfortable with having one giant spreadsheet that's unmanageable and unsearchable, or if you have a dozen files and you just want to click and open it, that's great. But the thing here is the sharing, right? So making a table public so that you can add it to your profile and people can go and see it. These are publicly browsable as well. I mean, there's not a lot of them up here because it defaults to private, but I want to start
Oh,
sharing it
gotcha.
a little bit
Okay.
more and telling people, hey, you should make that public. But that's stuff I got
Right.
to do there. But as you do that, you can go and you can take a look at the ones that are out there, and I'll follow you if you have a cool public profile, and if you have a bunch of tables, you can go and take a look at them all and say, okay, well, what's there? And then you can go and roll on them and say, okay, I want to get some outcomes from these, and take a look at what they look like, right? So you can pull the table down and look at it. You can take a look at some rolls to see what the examples are, and then you can go to DerfDice and say, you know what, I want like 15 or 20 or whatever of these, and then just roll them all up.
Right. I love it. And like I said, I want to echo
Hmm.
uh, that point for anyone out there who's listening right now, because one of the things when we very first started, when we connected about the application, one of the early things that went through my mind was, you know, as more and more modern tools are coming, into our possession to utilize at our tables, there isn't always uh, a enough consideration given for that kind of backwards compatibility. So I really wanted to echo for anyone out there who's listening right now who has been utilizing those random tables to enhance their games. Undoubtedly, I know I've got and like I said, I don't employ them near enough, but spreadsheets are my
Hmm.
random table environment of choice, or I should say they were prior to you and I hooking up. That so that should not be downplayed. How simple it is to take those years or decades worth of content,
Hmm.
bring them into this space, and like you said, I mean, just a phenomenal tool for organizing and parsing through that information rather than just having kind of of a massive spreadsheet floating out there in space. So
And the goal
really,
is sharing, right? So I've spent some time building social media platforms in the Bay Area at a couple different companies, and coming up with ways that you can create something and share it with people, I think is really powerful, right? So you can always export your tables, send it over to someone else if they want to take it and put it into a document, or just send them a link to it and say, hey, you can click on it here, right?
yeah,
We did add a couple other features into it that I thought were kind of interesting and fun, from various profiles, or various scripting language features. One of which that I've been working on here for a while is a magic item table. And what I've done is I've taken a bunch of, and I think I'm up to like 83 of them now. Every time I see something cool that somebody has put, and yes, I have one of my own in there. That's kind of funny. It's got markup language, so you can basically go out and take a look at something that somebody has made, right? So
right,
this
very
magic
cool.
item table, if I go and I take a look at it there, it will generate a bunch of items from different people that have been posted to the internet, and it's promotional material for their stuff, right? So if you have a
Right,
cool book and you want to have a table and say, you know what, I'm going to put my wild magic table that's part of my cool campaign book that's for sale, you can put a link back to your Patreon or to your other site or wherever it is inside of that, as markup as part of the way that you're building your table.
Yeah. You've done so much on the back end in terms of allowing people to share this content, and like I said, the community that can kind of drum up around this application, which obviously further props up and emboldens what it will be capable of doing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I know we've obviously had opportunity to talk about the application before, but even going back through it now, that markup is I think still to date one of my favorite portions of the application, and being able to have that quick reference both for independent creators who are wanting to be able to kind of have a fair shake at showcasing their own content.
Mm-hmm.
It really is uh like I said, it's just it's icing on the cake at this point. If anybody,
Yeah.
that really shouldn't be the factor that sells anyone, given everything we've already talked about.
Right.
But it's just one of those things that, I mean, it's so cool to be able to reference. And some for some people, the visual and art aspect is not as big a deal to them, and then other people, that's going to be a huge deal to be able to kind of have linked to that some visualization of this item or creature or what have you. So
Mm-hmm.
some really cool opportunities there.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Can I bug you, only because I've gotten so much joy out of doing it? And mainly it's because kind of I would say my players, they like to eat and they like to drink. Uh
Yes.
and so my Joe the Elf problem has more so been that they've been into many a tavern
Mm-hmm.
to consume the uninspired dwarven ales,
Right.
and albeit a fine elven vintage.
Mm-hmm.
It all ends up kind of, and it's a place where, again, I don't exhaust a lot of bandwidth in that space, but anytime I'm in the spot where they go, well, what do you have to drink? They're asking the barkeep, and I go, damn it, I wish I would have
Yeah.
come up with something for that.
There's a
I wish
keg
I
of
would have.
beer, and we have a
Yeah,
wheat beer, and there's an IPA, right?
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And I'm going to
Um,
click a button. Yes. And so I spent some time working on this, and when I was working with my friend CT on building the first set of tables, we had a roadmap of releasing weekly tables that led up to specific things, and one of which is the full tavern, right? The full tavern has
yeah.
got some
Okay.
NPCs, the name, and it's got meat and drink, right? So we built
Love it.
something where we sat down, and the big challenge there is, how do you make your drinks sound like they're not like something from a bad fantasy movie, right? There's enough Dragon Claw ale out there in terms of what you can come up with, and just coming up with a bunch of different drink names that just are off the wall, right? And saying,
Right,
okay,
right.
what are they and what can you say about them? And that was a really fun project. The town project was the second one after that, and it does include a number of taverns, but putting this level of detail into all the things that you find, and saying, okay, what's on the menu, right? And setting it up, and making it so that it's authentically medieval, because people would eat anything if it moved, right? So you get squirrel, raccoon, salmon, pork, and I'll roll again, and just to see the variety of things. Cheaper fare, which is here are the side dishes, and look at the sheer number of all the different ones here. Here's your stereotypical Dragon's Revenge, but also then you have Golden Granite Downs Meadery, right? And just a
Right,
whole pile of
right.
different ones, and different food things. A double horse on this one, and tofu, right? So some interesting food choices there. But you
Right.
can always take a bunch of these and blend them together if you want to have a bigger menu, right? And saying,
Yeah.
okay, what's fun? And
Well,
the
and what I love is because you're able to generate this content and share this content so easily.
Mhm.
For the most part, around our table, we're running. Well, I say we're split. Some portion of our table, manages their character digitally, and
Mhm.
some portion of our table manages it pen and paper. But what I love is the idea that they walk into a tavern, or I should say, as they're approaching the tavern, and they get that look in their eye, that look that says, I'm going to eat way more than I should, and I'm definitely going to drink way more than I should.
Yep.
Given that tomorrow at 4 a.m. we've got to go
Yeah.
climb into the bowels of hell.
Right.
Um,
Mhm.
but and to be able to it really got me thinking about ways in which I could distribute that as they enter that tavern. If they go to inquire about um, what's available, rather than me having to list it off. In some taverns, that may be the direction I want to go. There's a riff in our campaign, which is it's like a riff on an Applebee's or a Sizzlers or what. It's kind of the first ever conceptualized chain restaurant called Slingers, and
Hmm.
it's just, but it's 100% the type of place that would be they would be ahead of their time in offering a proper paper menu. And it immediately got me thinking about being able to generate something like that on the fly and literally just send it to them
Hmm.
digitally. So by sharing it with them, they can look over the menu and just go, I guess I'll have the squirrel, I guess. We're on a
Hmm.
budget here. So so there's some cool additional ways as DMs that we can think about disseminating that information beyond simply the barkeep or um a tavern girl conveying
Hmm.
what's good on the menu or what have you. So a lot of cool ways that you can kind of actuate on that. But I know I was really tickled by what I originally had come across, the menu generator,
Hmm.
or I'm sorry, just um uh
The drink
the
generator.
drink generator, and then the menu generator, and that really was kind of my first inclination of the way in which you would be able to layer these tables to generate some really really complex and very robust results. So that was an aspect I knew at some point I was going to ask you to just show it off a little bit, because it's something that, like I said, that's my Joe the Elf, is
Yeah.
is what are the drinks. My party doesn't read. They don't talk with NPCs. They drink.
Right.
They drink and they
Hmm.
drink. So no, I love it, man. So like I said, I know that was kind of the one of the areas I wanted to steer you to. I wanted to kind of give you free reign if there's anything else that you're really wanting to be able to um, let anyone at home see about the app, and kind of why we're doing that. For those who, like I said, likely are already going, this looks cool, I got to go see what this is about. Talk with me a little bit too about, um, are there tiers? Is it a membership deal? Is it exactly how do you have the I guess payment structured, if there is such
Yeah.
a thing?
Yeah. So you can roll like up to 10 or something number of times per dice roll, as much as you want on these tables. I'm hosting this all right now on a personal server, and I'm trying to experiment with the model. And I think I've got a
Okay,
pricing plan right now that's about to change. So, if you like this and you think it's kind of cool, this number is going to come down. Probably $10 a year, 99 cents a month is the probably the right
oh,
price.
that's
But at the same time, I'm going to do that in the next little while. But there's pretty much, you can do whatever you want for free in this. And when you sign up, you get the ability to kind of go and look at all these tables. The only limitation of a premium account is you can't build more than 30 of your own tables. Everything else you can do
gotcha.
in
Okay.
some quantity or quality of amount. The biggest thing is the little green check mark here. I've added some stuff because it was, as you discovered, hunting around to make yourself email verified was the big thing. But you set up a basic account, so you can just go in there, create a throwaway account, and go. If you have a valid email address and you validate it, then you get an additional number of roles. And then if you have a premium profile, then you can basically just roll infinitely and have an infinite number of tables and just have as much fun as you want. And I'm changing the
Gotcha.
pricing because I just haven't seen an uptick in that of people signing up for it. But this is still pretty early, right?
Right, right.
The idea here is, what does the market bear? What do people want to do? And I do software for a living, and trying to figure out how to build your software and price your software is just a big pain. And so we created a whole pile of stuff. The Derf Lib account has got 145 followers right now. And the idea is, what we did is we went and we built probably 40 to 50 tables of just stuff that you could use as tools. And then we sat down and started getting more direct and saying, okay, now let's take the taverns to the next level. And that involved
Gotcha.
having the menus and the NPCs. And then, okay, let's do a couple other things. Let's build some diabolical villains, right? And then a few people started asking about some other things, and then I sat down and said, okay, how do we build a town generator, and what goes into that,
Gotcha.
and
Okay.
and then just kind of going through all the pieces there, and getting to the final end and saying, okay, you know what, from all these things, and actually I'm going to follow CT from the DerfLib account because I haven't done that before. That'll save me a click in getting there. And he built a bunch of these as part of an ongoing project because, as you can see, you got the pub patrons, then you got the tavern meals, and then the tavern drinks, and then the tavern menu. We built a fun
Very
foraging
cool.
table, and the this one's kind of fun because one of the things that's in there is he put a bunch of actual plants that exist in this table. And so he then spent
Cool.
a half day rolling up stuff, and by the end of it, he confessed that he didn't know what was real anymore. Right.
Oh,
But the
gotcha.
idea there is like, take a look at this one here. The clearing full of burdock, sometimes called beggar's button, used by alewives for flavoring brews. And if you're out foraging, maybe you're going to find stuff that will help you in your adventure somewhere. And let's just speed through a bunch more of these. Like for example, you can find stuff like this, reputed to be the main ingredient for mind enhancing concoction. So maybe you have an alchemist in the party, or you need to make some coin because you're dirt poor because you just got your driven out of a dungeon, and you're like, what, I'm going to go pick some flowers and make some money. Right. And some of these are good, ingredient
Yeah.
for numbing pain, ingredients for improving strength, and just adding fun things there. And for him,
Yeah.
that was his Joe the Elf table, right? For him, he just loved rolling on this and building these things and having a bunch of different plants out there that he could do stuff with. For me,
Right.
it's
Right.
names. For you, it's drinks. And then everyone's got something else. The DM roundtable from Brennan Lee Mulligan was the books, right? So we built one of
Right.
those for giggles too, and just sort of like, okay, if you're going into a library, and you basically say, okay, you know what, I'm going to take 15 books off the shelf. You can go and you can generate those, and it's everything: tiny book about spells, which has seen better days, all the way to scripture and books of workshops, and a volume on the history of the war with Sheba. And you just keep going and going until somebody says, okay, fine, all right, I've stopped pillaging the library. I'm going to take what I got, and then I'm done.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and the cool part is I think oftentimes that type of stuff, like what's the name of the next book? What's the name of the next book? Like it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of a riff, like a player's actually, ribbing you a little bit. But the
Mm-hmm.
cool part is that really is the level of specificity we would, if we had the bandwidth to, that we would want our players to be engaging with our worlds. We don't,
Right.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and this, you know, short of that barrier, there's no reason why we wouldn't want them to explore an entire library.
Mm-hmm.
And this tool really, gives us a big step in the direction of being able to actually do that. And that's something that, I mean, as you were pulling up the foraging table, it's just
Mm-hmm.
like, there's no one out there who isn't thinking about the last time one of their players foraged. And this is not to
Mm-hmm.
suggest that someone out there isn't doing a phenomenal job with their own foraging tables and what have you. But I know the last time my players foraged, I wish that I had delivered them, something as vibrant and robust. And again, even if it was innocuous, it still had all sorts of flavor baked into it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really think that whatever that is, whatever anyone listening, whatever their Joe the Elf is, whatever their uh alcohol names or
Mm-hmm.
books or foraging ingredients, um you know thus far I've been pretty hard pressed to think of one of those that you guys haven't already started to touch on here. Whether however
Mm-hmm.
deep you've gone down the rabbit hole, but the scaffolding is there, and the beauty is that's, I mean, that's half the reason to jump on this platform. If you have one of those, maybe
Yeah.
it's someone's already handling it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you'll be that person who, through your own sorting that out for yourself, will make that available to the next person who's having the same issue. And again, those lists will only get more robust as you go along. I had one quick question with
Mm-hmm.
regard to, you were talking about kind of working from these initial lists and then pivoting into these more curated lists, like
Mm-hmm.
the tavern generator and the town generators and things like this. Is it fair to say that that's more or less kind of the where the premium account stuff goes towards? Is that more hosting stuff, or I mean, is it fair to say that that's kind of, if you're thinking about getting a premium account, that to
Mm-hmm.
some extent you're helping support you guys in generating more curated content for the application?
Right. And it is sort of like, how do you store enough tables to put stuff in there, right? There's 4 or 5 of the 150 users that have gotten over 30 tables at this point, right? And sitting down
Right.
and saying, okay, what do I really need? Do I just want to link a bunch of other people's tables, or do I have some sort of opus project that I want to work on that kind of goes from there? And that's really the difference, right? The goal for me is, I would love to just have thousands of people just using the tables, right? They're cached in
Right,
memory
right.
pretty easily. They will help you with your game. I can see when the site is most used and what is happening the most on some of these tables, and the goal there is for me to have enough people out there that are putting additional stuff out there and sharing it and making stuff that is share worthy. And I haven't done a great job of communicating how to make your account profile public, or how to build tables and then mark them public when you create them. Like they start defaulted to private. But I figured I didn't want people to find out that their stuff was all out in the wilderness as a default, right? That to me felt a
Right, and
little
I
wrong.
yeah, I think that's a
Mm-hmm.
a reasonable position, but I
Mm-hmm.
think again, anyone who's listening to this, and certainly anyone who moves over to the app and checks things out,
Mm-hmm.
for my 2 cents, I know that was, like I said, that's something that really got me excited, was
Mm-hmm.
knowing that as the user base expands and as more people make more content public, the power of the application is really limitless based
Mm-hmm.
on how many people are choosing to interact with it.
That's
So,
right.
yeah, I
And
love that.
then in the same time, there's a handful of us that are basically, we've committed to adding a new table pretty much every week, right? And the goal there is, and I'm working on the one for this week. This one that just went up last week is rumors. If you need a bunch of rumors for the tavern of stuff that's happening in the world, you could go and do that, right? So we
Right,
did the
right.
towns, we did the tavern, so I'm going to do some geographical tables afterwards for
Okay.
probably some of the rest of the year. And then it's dealer's choice at that point, right? I'm going to Twitter now and I'm taking requests from people. Somebody said, hey, I need a failed potion table, and a bunch of us on Discord sat down and generated a bunch of cool failed potion entries, right? As to what happens if
Nice.
you have a cheap potion factory, like, right, what happens there. And where'd that one go?
I love that. Well, just that right there. I mean, I already, my like, the second you said your
Mm-hmm.
cheap potion factory, and I went, oh man, what a fun bit of shenanigans could play out in busting up
Mm-hmm.
a counterfeit potion ring. Just it really is amazing how little it takes to spark some creativity when you're doing world building,
Mm-hmm.
and like I said, I have yet to wipe the grin off my face as I'm clicking roll, 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 and
Right.
just watching ideas spark in my mind. So
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Yep.
Yeah. See, check this out. The rainbow fat flatulence one, right? One makes you smell like sticky cheese. One makes you smell like strawberries. One of them will make you have narcolepsy for one day in this case, right? And then they'll just keep falling asleep in the middle of the adventure.
Yeah.
Slightly faster life. Madagascar's curse. You turn into a penguin for one turn. They're able to speak and cast spells, but must use both hands to hold items. Right? Just
Gotcha.
random stuff, right? And that was a
Yeah. Yeah.
collaborative effort with a handful of folks from one of the discords that I'm on. Right? There's like 3 other people who helped work on that. I don't know the real
Very
names.
cool.
Sale, pending data,
Very cool.
Blacklight 101. Right? Thanks, you guys. That was a fun experience, and that's the whole idea, right? Is how do you come up with cool stuff so that you can feed people's creativity, and like you said, get through the tedious creativity part and let you focus on the big story, right? And so,
Right. Right.
and it, don't fool yourself, it's really a thing, right? So I've spent a lot of time building video games, and when you get to the point where you're building all these big zones and you're building all this stuff, building procedurally generated content and tools so that you can come up with hundreds of NPCs and things like that. As you're building your world, you are doing the same thing in slow motion, and it's a
Right.
job and it's tiring. To speak to that one person earlier who's a professional designer, where she said, I want 30 pieces of NPC dialogue for part of my technical screen. There's a point to asking for 30 of them because it's hard, right? And you're
Right.
doing the
Right.
same thing in slow motion over your game. And if you think that's not taking away your energy, it takes a decent amount to do that, and it's distracting,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
you don't notice it until you're at the end and you're like, whew, I'm spent, right? That session just took a bunch out of me. And you might not even know it because you're still on some adrenaline rush because of something cool you or the players did.
Right, right, right. And I think that's I don't think it's always acknowledgeable how much of your bandwidth is going into these tasks. Or I should say your bandwidth as a DM,
Mm-hmm.
potentially even as players too. There are certainly some activities I'm sure that uh, are are eating their bandwidth that they could be siphoning into kind of the parts
Mm-hmm.
of the game that you really want to be siphoning that energy
Right.
into. And that's, I mean, honestly, I was actually just about to ask you for some more thoughts, with regard to the implementation of these types of tables. But I think you kind of beat me to the punch. That's about as succinct a a rationale for why you should be thinking about these tables.
Hmm.
This is a little bit of odd verbiage here. These tables at your table, uh,
Right.
because every little bit of every bite of headspace that you have,
Hmm.
that you can free up is a little bit of extra, a little bit of extra icing you can put on this role play cake that you're making with the NPC they're engaging with, or
Hmm.
or a juicier, more brutal description of the killing blow on some enemy, or
Yeah.
what have you.
Hmm.
That's the places that we want to sink our teeth in and really invest ourselves in making that world come alive.
Hmm.
And the DerfDice app that you have created really, in my experience thus far, and like I said, I'm still a relatively new user to it, but I'm getting
Hmm.
so much out of it. uh, does so much heavy lifting in terms of making all of the aspects of your game visceral and juicy, and
Hmm.
instead of just the ones that you love making that way. And I think you can fall into a certain pattern as a DM of, oh, I love running combat, I love describing the frenetic scene that's playing out. Cool, that might be your jam, and then they go to the library and they can't get a single cohesive title of a book out of
Yeah,
your mouth,
exactly. It's like, yeah.
and
Some books. I heard some noises down the hall. Let's go. Right. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think it does open up, for, like I said, this is really speaking to people
Hmm.
who are maybe needing a little convincing for why they should be employing these tools.
Hmm.
It opens up, uh, it really opens the world up into the portions of the game that maybe you don't immediately sink your teeth into as a DM, the portions of the world,
Hmm.
that very likely your players want to be able to explore more deeply. But that kind of ongoing negotiation between DM and player, this goes a long way in making you equally potent, even in the areas that you haven't been able to apply the bandwidth, or frankly maybe didn't care to put the bandwidth when you were doing your prep,
Hmm.
or running the game. So like I said, it's filling a lot of gaps for me as a DM, and for that reason, I would say to anybody who is kind of questioning whether or not this is a direction that they want to go at their table, especially because you're offering the ability to try the app out for free.
Hmm.
Jump on it and play around with it. Whether you get it, uh, whether you're getting use of it at your table while you're running your sessions,
Hmm.
which, like I said, I can attest, it certainly works in that capacity, or the other edge of that blade being,
Your
um,
prep time.
your prep time. And like I said,
Hmm.
there's times where I'll just be sitting around and I'll jump on my phone and I'll roll up, I'll just skim the tables and roll on something, and it'll just start that snowball of like, oh, that's a cool tavern, and wait, oh, the that NPC's doing what? Oh, wait, that's, and you know an hour later, even though I didn't set out to go down that road,
Yeah.
I've got this cool kind of adventure hook starting to unspool. And it's, so I like I said, I can't endorse it highly enough. I am still, like I said, um, in the infancy stage of my own use of the application, but at every turn I have been impressed. I wanted to hand it over your way, John, to say anything else that you might have about the app itself, but also, um, we generally
Hmm.
will kind of, as we push on towards the end of these types of segments,
Hmm.
to just give you an opportunity um to kind of whatever your mind's been crunching on, whether it's game
Hmm.
related, outside of the game, anything like that.
One more quick thing, and then we'll do
Yeah.
that. And that's
Yep.
you talked about player tables, right? I have exactly two. I have a critical hit table and a critical fumble
Oh,
table, right?
beautiful, beautiful.
And the idea here is if you look at it after you roll your d20, you roll a second d20 to determine the effect because it's a scalar, right? It goes all the way up to a double 20 is like a kill shot. So you have a 1 in 400 chance of, on my table, of when you're playing a game, of critically hitting your opponent and just basically ending it all, right? And let me tell you, it doesn't
Right.
happen that often. 1 in 400 times doesn't happen, but when it does, that table goes nuts, right? So
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
critical hits, critical fumbles, but I have exactly two player tables right now. There's a room for growth and opportunity there for people to build cool player tables. Love to hear about it on Twitter. Follow me or send me a direct message at DerfDice on Twitter, please do so, because I'd love to expand some more things and put them out here. You could just roll on this link right here. The homebrew preview link lets you just basically go and say, okay, you know what? I'm just going to take this thing and I'm just going to go to a roll. And then it gives you like 6 rolls just as a sample, so you can kind of sample these things there. But you can just use this and link it into your players and say, click on this and then take the first thing and tell me what happens. Whether it's, triple damage, double damage, no effect, 3 additional damage, whatever, right? The idea was to make it really easy and frictionless for someone to just roll on a table and get 1 or more outcomes from it. But that's kind of really the big one, right? Looking for interesting ideas for ways players could do this, because I basically tell people that when I work on this is like, I have a tool to help people tell better stories.
I've only started to scratch the surface in my own mind of ways in which players, again, I generally am viewing things through that DM lens, but the ways in which players might be able to leverage this application to start designing all sorts of cool stuff through that player lens. Like I said, I'd have to crunch on that a little bit more. But I mean, you've already outlined, one really exciting one.
Well, I'm a DM for life, right? I like to sit on the other side of the screen, and I've always got like a world where I want to throw people in and do something there. And that's kind of the big thing that I'm thinking about right now is, I have to rebuild my whole gaming group from scratch at this point after spending a year on this and fiddling around. And it's probably going to be sometime in the January timeframe, but looking to get a virtual group going back together now that I've basically taken this. I've got a developer who's going to add some first-time user notifications and pop-ups. There's a system by which it does remind you of things from time to time, saying, hey, you have a free account, so you can only roll 10 times at once as opposed to 100 times at once. And there's no real limits beyond that. So if you have a premium account, you can roll 100 times and away you go, and just keep rolling through ad infinitum, or you can push the button 10 times for free. I want the barrier to be relatively low. I want this to be one of those things where it's like you feel like you are getting money from it, and I don't want to put barriers saying you can't have that, right?
Right.
So setting that up, building tables, making them public, letting other people roll on them. That's sort of like something that I want to do for the community, because I've used this so much over, 30 something years of gaming, over the bulk of that towards, I built this actually in the mid 90s as a C++ tool for myself, and modernizing it and taking my tables and converting them to an online format and saying, hey, here you guys go, right? And for me, it's getting back to the table myself and restarting with a group of people. Corny as it may be, I started my original campaign where I actually had a physical printout saying, hey, looking for adventurers, we have a tavern headed south on a mission of diplomatic importance, and if you need a job, come to the tavern. And that's how I started the campaign. And I still have the physical printout from the mid 90s in my closet. I was digging around for stuff because I have all these old maps, and then trying to find old CD-ROMs full of my old Word docs from the mid 90s and moving them into Google Drive so I could use those to start building nice looking homebrewed campaign notes and getting them out there.
Very cool. Very cool. So this campaign that you are rebooting, it's roughly the January timeframe that you're going to be starting to look for players, and this will be an entirely virtual setting, so people could kind of, so long as their schedules would line up, they could kind of join from anywhere. Correct? Okay.
Yeah, late night PST, after the kids go to bed. I haven't figured out the exact time, but it's going to be one of the nights I'm not raiding in WoW. But this, I'm wearing my I have a handful of shirts that I wear for specific things, and this is the shirt you don't want to see, right? The classic cartoon shirt from the show. When I'm wearing this shirt, you're going to want to buy extra potions, is what I always tell people. And
there you go.
Dress for success is what I tell people, right? It's like, hey, this is my guy. So
love it. I love it. So I will make sure that any of the links necessary get down in the description. But real briefly, is through social media, how should people be reaching out to you if they're interested in joining? And correct me if I'm wrong, this is kind of hearkening back to that very original setting, that very you're kind of being able to go back to square one from kind of this world that's played out over how long did
1994 till now, was that?
Okay, so a couple decades. Yeah.
And started in Toronto, existed in Waterloo, migrated to California, and then through like 5 or 6 cities in California up to and including some coworkers in San Francisco before the pandemic hit, right? And brought the whole thing to a close. And it's just one of those things, random homebrewed world. I gotta figure out, in making it 5th edition, I have to add some of the the rules for the new races that are out there, the Aasimar and Tieflings and things that people like to play, and just kind of, you know, catch that all up and fit that into the documents that I have, and then away you go.
Okay. Cool. And that is an important note. Sounds like you're going to be running that in fifth edition. And is Twitter the easiest way to
Yep.
get to you in that regard? Okay.
Yep.
I will make sure that any of those links, like I said, we'll have the links obviously for DerfDice and all that. Any ways that people can get in touch with you, support you, any of that kind of stuff, and certainly we'll make sure some links get down in there for anyone who's thinking about taking a step back in time to where it all began for John. You got any final words here before we kind of wrap this up? I like I said, I'm really glad that you were able to come on and like I said, walk everyone through the application. I know so far it's served me well. I can say that whether you're going to check it out as a free account or you find value in it and decide to go to premium, I cannot see anyone being disappointed at whatever you end up doing with the price point. There is a tremendous amount of value there. It's something, like I said, that I've gotten a huge amount of use of. So any last words for those people out there who might be thinking about implementing those tables or jumping over on DerfDice?
Yeah, and really it's just the open question that I ask a lot of people is like, how can you tell better stories, right? And just sitting down and taking a look at it, you know, we are all great at our craft. You know, if you wouldn't be, your players would be gone. You know, and as you build your table, you build your thing. What's the one thing you could always improve on something, right? I know what some of my weak spots are, and I've shored them up through this and found that they've been tremendous. And the feedback from a lot of people is like, this is really great. How come I've never heard of this? And it's like, well, I just built it, and I don't have a marketing budget because this is just brand new. Right, you know, and seeing something build up and the first couple hundred users coming in and playing around with it and checking it out has been super fun. But just asking yourself, you know, what do I need to do to make my table better for my players and make the story better? And
I love that.
That's really what I'm looking for, because that's what it did for me.
Yeah, and I will echo that 100%. That and to some extent, I think it helps highlight the aspects that you have not been applying yourself in, or that you're struggling in, or, you know, when you start to really find value is when you go, oh crap, I've really kind of neglected this aspect of it, and this is really helping me deliver in these places that, you know, that you know, you don't know what you don't know, and it's and until you start implementing it. So I absolutely like I said, I couldn't endorse it enough. Links down in the description to get over to DerfDice, as well as to get in touch with John via social media. We've got a little tradition here on Modern Myth, John. I whether you're privy to or not, although I hope I'm not springing this on you too much, but we sign off all of our videos here at Modern Myth with the phrase, "The world is yours." So I'm going to take us out, and if you would give us, I'll give you a point. If you would give us the most DerfDice, the most John Szeder, "The world is yours" that you can muster in any fashion you see fit.
All right.
You think you can help me out with that?
Yeah. Okay. Yes, I can. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get an ominous warning up on the screen for me here, and I'm going to tell you that the oceans will bring disastrous change. Look to the southeast, because the world is yours.